People do not quit jobs, they quit leaders. Change lessons from the CEO. Real people, real change reveals how to become one worth following. We will focus on what it says about change and authentic. Stay with me, the best part is near the end. Chapter 1: Your Journey to Leading Change Authentically. Chapter at a glance. Beginning cases. Preparation. Chapter Introduction. What is authentic leadership and what is it not? Becoming authentic. Leading change authentically. Chapter Summary. Chapter 2: Change Readiness. Are you ready for leading change? Chapter at a glance. Beginning cases. Preparation. Chapter Introduction. Mental models. The dark side of leadership. Narcissism. Mental toughness. Don't give up. Less ego, more humility. Resuscitate your passion for life and work. Chapter Summary. Chapter 3: Getting employees ready for change. Chapter at a glance. Beginning cases. Preparation. Chapter Introduction. Understanding readiness for change. Variables influencing reactions towards change. Creating change readiness. Leadership behaviors. Rethinking resistance to change. Managing resistance. Chapter Summary. Chapter 4: Understanding how people change. Chapter at a glance. Beginning cases. Preparation. Chapter Introduction. Understanding individual level change. The nature of habits. Stages of change. Endings and new beginnings. The experience of change. Principles of individual level change. The relationship between individual level and organizational level change. Chapter Summary. Chapter 5: Coaching for Change Success. Chapter at a glance. Beginning cases. Preparation. Chapter Introduction. What is coaching and what it is not. Principles to keep in mind when coaching adults. Implications of using adult learning principles for coaching. Skills needed to coach the coaching process. Critical success factors for using coaching during a change program. Chapter Summary. Chapter 6: Change Politics and Change Levers. Chapter at a glance. Beginning cases. Preparation. Chapter Introduction. Power and Politics. Change Management Practices Revisited. Designing Your Own Change Strategy. Understanding Change Levers. Chapter Summary. Conclusions. Index. Chapter 7: Authentic and Change. Your Journey to Leading Change Authentically. Chapter at a glance. In this chapter you will learn the fundamentals of leading change in an authentic manner together with some self-assessments to enable you to gauge your capacity to do this right now. It further aims to give you an understanding of what does it mean to be an authentic leader and leading change in an authentic manner. This chapter, based on the real experiences of CEOs we interviewed, will illustrate the importance of aligning your values and beliefs with your actions when leading change. Real change starts with you. It stems from your willingness to own your weaknesses, confess your failures, and recognize that many life stories do not have a happy ending. Block, 1997. However, while many of our life stories are turbulent, we do not have to remain prisoners of our past. We have the power to influence our future and therefore can still create a bright and optimistic future for the people we lead through difficult times. Being authentic is a choice you have to make. Nobody can do it for you. Leadership which is authentic is central to effective change leadership, and the chapter consists of two major components. In the first part, authentic leadership is discussed and an opportunity is provided for you, the leader, to explore the influence of personal life events on your authenticity. In the second part of the chapter, authenticity is linked to leading change. Complete the various exercises in the chapter, as this will provide you with powerful personal insights that are needed for leading change in an authentic manner. Beginning cases. Preparation. What does it mean to be authentic? The following quotations provide some perspectives of authenticity in practice. It seems an understanding of who you are and the willingness to be true to yourself, irrespective of the context, manifests in behavior that is experienced by others as genuine and worth emulating. Well, when you're running a big business, there are times when you cannot be nice, There's times when you have to make very tough decisions. There's times when you have to be very hard and tough, and that is all part of one's character. But you also know when to smile, and you also need to have a little twinkle in your eye. You need to know how to manage people. But it's only when you're really your own man can you really be yourself, because the moment you're having to please other people and think, am I going to get the promotion? Am I now going to be able to move from this company to that company because I want them to recommend me? Think I'm a nice person, no different than in your activity in a university. You don't want to go around being right or being confrontational by saying, well, that's not right and this and that. They'll say, well, he's a difficult bloke, we don't want to work with him. People used to think I was difficult, not difficult. People used to think I was very aggressive when I was younger. I was. So what? Be true to yourself. Well, the way I've always thought about authentic leadership is exactly what it says in the description. It's the authenticity of an individual and whether people really believe that what they see versus what they hear a leader saying they believe in and what they're going to do, and how closely those two correlate. Be authentic. My mom probably is very important in that. She's not the only one, but she's important at two different bits of my life because she and I had a very feisty, very argumentative relationship, not very comfortable, not very happy when I was very small, not very happy at all, and she asked a lot of me. She asked me to be very adult very early on, and the older I got the more I resented that. We were rather alike temperamentally, so quick to temper, and yet like my father, I don't like being angry, but my mum rather relished it. So I got caught between these two personality types that I wanted what my father seemed to be able to model, which was a rather calm existence, a patient existence, but in fact I was very easily wound up. And I think that battle has been very instructive in how I try to conduct myself and the sort of places that I've wanted to work in, the sort of roles I've wanted to take on. But also she and my father were ambitious for me, and there was certainly a sense that nothing was quite good enough, which again, when I was much younger I resented hugely. I don't anymore. But I listen nonetheless, the sense that praise didn't come very easily. The interesting question was why you didn't do better always. So that drives me too. It also can be debilitating sometimes, but it drives me for sure, always asking, could it have been done better? Could I have done it better? And the reason I say there's a lot in between, of course, but my mum passed away when I was 33, which is nearly 8 years ago, and that time in my life was quite a difficult one professionally, which I might say a bit more about in a second. But having actually a very powerful experience, she was ill for a year, very ill. And so I had this extraordinary, I think in a way almost fortunate experience of having a very close relationship with her in that time, which wasn't something that I think my mum and I thought we would have in our lifetimes, and whilst I wouldn't have wished it on her, I think I have a much happier memory of her than perhaps I would have had if things had been different. And so it was very powerful in a way, getting to know her. I think that's what I'm saying, getting to know her and getting to know myself through that relationship at a time when I was having quite a complex professional struggle. And then a great loss, which is very leveling might be the word I'd use, that although it's a bit of a glitch, it does actually put things in perspective, and I think I am a happier, calmer, more strategic leader now, and I think some of that is about losing my mum. That moment of crisis. The professional struggle at that time, which I do think has shaped me before. Understand Who You Are and Why chapter introduction. Some 500 years ago, Machiavelli, in his book The Prince, highlighted problems we can expect when implementing change. He stated there is no more delicate matter to take in hand, nor more dangerous to conduct, nor more doubtful in success, than to set up as a leader in the introduction of changes. For he who innovates will have for his enemies all those who are well off under the existing order of things, and only lukewarm supporters in those who might be better off under the new. Machiavelli, 1992. This is still true today. It is estimated that between 70–80% of all change initiatives fail to reach their objectives or achieve only partial success, or in the worst-case scenario, make the situation worse. In fact, some managers are actually surprised that so many change initiatives are successful. Either way, there is a great deal of opportunity for improvement. It seems that, despite the numerous change models, approaches and methodologies available in the literature, leaders do not fully appreciate what is required in guiding their organizations through change. Putting it differently, leaders continue to lack a clear understanding of change, its antecedents, its processes, or the ability to engage employees in change initiatives. Armanakis and Harris, 2002. Organizational leaders are responsible for developing the change strategy implementation, and monitoring. They also act as change agents in the organization. While the execution of organizational change must be well managed, fundamentally it requires effective leadership. There is growing evidence that leadership characteristics and behaviors influence the success or failure of organizational change. But change leadership is more than a skill, more than the knowledge of change theories, and requires more than just the effective use of cognitive abilities. It is the ability to act with purpose and ethically while constantly adjusting as the change situation requires. A successful change leader requires moral character, a strong concern for self, others, and ethical values. Why is this important? As change leader, you need to influence employees, and they will only follow you if they trust you. This means you need to lead and act in a specific manner. George et al., 2007, p. argue in this regard that the essence of leadership is not trying to emulate someone else, no matter how brilliant they are. Nor is it having the ideal leadership style, achieving competencies, or fixing your weaknesses. In fact, you don't need power or titles to lead. You only have to be authentic. This is also true for the leadership of change. What is authentic leadership and what is it not? In order to understand what does it mean to lead change in an authentic manner, the starting point is to understand what we mean by the term authentic. Authenticity, the idea of being oneself or being true to oneself, has been described in many different ways, and there is no agreed definition for authentic leadership. Indeed, the terms vary across culture. In Israel, the term mensch is used to describe a fully rounded, juicy person of integrity and goodness. Kernis, 2003, p. describes authenticity as the unobstructed operation of one's true, or core self in one's daily enterprise, consisting of 4 components: awareness, unbiased processing, authentic action, and relational authenticity. Wallumbla et al., 2008, p. building on this definition, regard authentic leadership as a pattern of leader behavior that draws upon and promotes both psychological capacities and a positive ethical climate, to foster greater self-awareness, an internalized moral perspective, balanced processing of information, relational transparency on the part of the leaders working with followers, fostering positive self-development. Despite the different ways the concept is described, it is possible to identify themes from the literature. Authenticity is to be informed by the true self. Authentic leaders demonstrate high levels of self-awareness, have clarity about personal values and convictions, and the connection between authentic leadership and moral leadership are highlighted. Ladkin and Taylor, 2010, Cooper, et al., 2005, Shamir and Ilam, 2005. Therefore, the core of authenticity can be regarded as to know, accept, and remain true to oneself. Avolio et al., 2004, p. And authentic leaders are not only aware of their personal values but act accordingly. Organizational change is inherently chaotic and puts enormous pressure on the change leader. Having a clear understanding of what your values are all about and acting according to your values provides you with guidelines on how to act and behave during organizational change. Defining authentic leadership and identifying antecedents for authentic leadership, Gardner et al., 2005a, and Avolio, et al., 2009, argue that key variables such as self-awareness, which include the leader's values, identity, emotions, and goals, and self-regulation, which consists of balanced processing of information, internalized regulation, authentic behavior, and relational transparency, can be regarded as two important building blocks of authentic leadership. This means that authentic leaders are motivated from their values and convictions to act and are not obsessed or driven by prestige, status, and organizational position. They are clear on what is important to them, how they feel, and what their needs are. Putting it differently, change leaders who act in an authentic manner exhibit qualities such as honesty, integrity, credibility. They are straightforward and dependable. Our CEOs describe this as follows: I think it's very easy to say things, but people will see you doing things, hear you saying things that they then will look at your body language, will look at what actions you then take, will look at your history and question whether, in their minds, it all adds up to genuineness and whether you really are a leader that does exactly what you say you're going to do, and the minute you cross that line and don't, I think people then question how authentic you are. I think there's a great program, The Office, which I think is the classic of when people are sort of challenging authentic leaders. The Office is a great example of a leader who nobody believes is authentic, who has picked up all the right phrases to say, all the right ways of leading that you're meant to do, but in practice doesn't do it and doesn't believe it, and you can see through that. So I think for me, authentic leadership is about probably what comes from the heart, what you genuinely stand for, and particularly when things are tough, whether you're true to everything you talk about. So I think it's very much about the emotions that you share, that you show, the vision that you have, the values that you have, and then what people actually see you doing, and then they will make judgments based on that. When leading change, authentic behavior creates trust. Congruence between actions and words is crucial. You cannot declare yourself as authentic. It is ascribed to you by your followers. Being authentic means also a willingness to share your emotions. Authenticity for me very simply is you've got to be you. Don't be anybody else. Therefore what that means is be prepared to self-disclose. Be prepared to talk to people about your strengths. But absolutely in equal measure be very prepared to talk to people about your limitations and where you need their help, because the more that you do that, as a leader, the more they will identify with you as a human being, and the more they'll be likely to help you when they realize you're in trouble because you're in an area you know nothing about or that you're weak at. It also means only promising what you can deliver and not falling into the trap of overpromising. People hate that. They hate it. It means being utterly true to your own sense of purpose and belief and value. So I suppose the old beliefs and behaviors thing, if your behaviors, as a leader, are in sync with your beliefs as a person, you're going to be authentic. And you can see my behaviors because they're manifest, but you can't see my beliefs. So it follows, if my beliefs are somewhere else and my behaviors are still what they are today, I am a fraud. And you'll probably be able to detect that even though you don't know what my particular belief sets are, it will become very clear to you, because human beings are not stupid, unless I am the world's greatest actor, that my behavior is not a reflection of my true beliefs, and in that sense I am inauthentic. And as an inauthentic leader I don't command any respect, because you can't identify with me as a human being. You can't identify with me as somebody who would be a role model for you to follow. If I don't set an example, you know I fail on the rudimentary basics of being a leader. So for me, authenticity is critical, and it's amazing to me How many people get up in the morning with their partner or spouse or whatever and have breakfast with the family and they're themselves, and they get in the car or on the bus or the tube or whatever it is to go to work and they're all themselves, and they get out of the car or off the bus or whatever and they come up to the front doors of the office, and as they hit the front doors of the office they change and they start using language that they don't use at home and adopt a suddenly managerial tone of talking and think that they can get away with it. And of course everybody sees them for the sucker that they are. But they're there, they exist, they're all over the place, we see them all the time, and they're not leaders, they're fakes. Be willing to be open and honest about the self. Being authentic is being consistently genuine and true to yourself. Authentic behavior leads to identification with the leader. Authentic leaders do not hide behind masks, however. In an attempt to live up to organizational expectations and norms, managers do not always act authentically or act in accordance with their own values, that is, being able to be true to oneself. In some organizational contexts it may be dangerous to be yourself, perhaps in inauthentic organizations. However, too many managers believe that the road to success needs to be hidden in deception, and they wear a mask of inauthenticity. This facade is used to manipulate, and they are hardly ever able to reveal the true self. Exploring the Dark Side of Leadership, Ketz de Vries, 1993, argues that narcissistic leaders need power, prestige, drama, and enjoy the manipulation of others. He describes narcissistic leaders as follows: they do not tolerate criticism, are reluctant to exhibit give and take behavior, and surround themselves with sycophants. Some leaders are unable to express emotion and lack the ability to empathize, encourage creativity, and respond appropriately to conflict. Palmer, 1994, pages 25-26, argues in this regard that a leader must take special responsibility for what is going inside his or her own self, inside his or her consciousness, lest the act of leadership create more harm than good. I suggest that the challenge is to examine our consciousness for those ways in which we leaders may project more shadow than light. The problem is that people rise to leadership in our society by a tendency towards extroversion, which too often means ignoring what's going on inside themselves. George, et al., 2007, p. Summarize the characteristics of authentic leaders as follows. Authentic leaders demonstrate a passion for their purpose, practice their values consistently, and lead with their hearts as well as their heads. They establish long-term, meaningful relationships and have the self-discipline to get results. They know who they are. Passion, value-driven, meaningful relationships results. Leaders need to explore their inner world and must be able to look inside themselves. This is important, as who we are, and how much we understand about ourselves, determines how we lead change. You cannot become authentic by imitating someone else. You have to be yourself. Understanding and developing this capacity is important to successful leading change. However, authenticity is not defined by you, that is, I am authentic, but it is defined by what other people see in you. Putting it differently, it is a quality that others must attribute to you. Expressing and demonstrating your authentic self is a choice that you have to make. Goffey and Jones, 2000, 2007, Nicholson, 2013, and these authors ask a very pertinent question. Why should anyone want to be led by you? What does it take to lead change effectively, to engage people and revive their commitment to organizational change? The starting point on the journey of becoming a great leader is the expression of the authentic self, and in the next section this will be explored in more detail. Dee Hock, founder of Visa, put it like this: control is not leadership, management is not leadership. Leadership is leadership. If you seek to lead, invest at least 50% of your time in leading yourself, your own purpose, ethics, principles, motivation, conduct. Invest at least 20% leading those with authority over you and 15% leading your peers. Leadership starts with you becoming authentic. The question then becomes, are authentic leaders born or raised? From previous research on how people can become and remain authentic, it seems that an individual does not have to be born with any universal characteristics or traits. George et al., 2007, p. 1, but it is possible to discover your potential and develop authentic leadership. Authentic leaders are defined by their unique life stories, and the way they frame and understand those life stories to discover their passions and the purpose of their leadership. Authentic leaders display different types of behaviors, and in the next section this is discussed in more detail. Understanding and making sense of the past. The personal history of the leader, that is, family, role models, early life challenges, educational and work experiences, can be regarded as key trigger events which shape the individual in that they constitute dramatic and sometimes subtle changes in the individual's circumstances that facilitate personal growth and development. Gardner et al., 2005 b. p. It is these significant events, personal struggles, extreme challenges, failures, triumphs, people, and how they made sense of these experiences that have shaped them as leaders. These significant events can take many forms and influence how we view and lead change. The loss of one or both parents or adversity associated with family poverty has a formative influence on 1. How change is viewed, 2. The capacity to lead, and 3. How change is managed. Fundamental life goals are formed by these experiences. The key to understanding the relevance and impact of the past is finding answers to two fundamental questions: what is going on here? And what do I do next? Weick et al. Some of these group sensing skills are learned at a very early age in either the family or amongst peer groups of friends. The role of early life challenges and making sense of these events can be explained as follows. My own upbringing got a rude shock when I went into the military. There, I learned to do what I was told, to start off with, but about 2/3 of the way through it I became aware of my political side, and I became aware that everything that I'd been fighting for was flawed, deeply flawed, and that's not a great place for a soldier to be. It's not a great place for a leader to be, and I was a leader in the national service. Even though it was only a small stick or platoon of troops, it was nevertheless a position of leadership, but a position of leadership in a war environment. When you have deep concerns about what the hell you're doing, I just thought, this is nonsense, the vision that I'm fighting for is madness, it's never going to work ever. So what the hell are we going to do about that? But I'm just one tiny little cog, so what do you do if you don't believe in the strategy of the company? If you don't believe in the strategy of the organization? You've got to get out. But I think that experience and my incredulity at the fact that my parents, who of course until then I had loved unquestioningly, clearly endorsed the wrong that was the white minority regime, was a massive problem for me, personally, at the time. So all of a sudden all of my benchmarks of solidity were shattered. So, my parents were wrong, I was right, but I was on my own and I had to get out, and so I came to Europe as a pretty vulnerable, mixed up but very resilient, I had to be, to get through that, young man. Awareness of challenge, sense making of the situation, taking action. The experiences of the military leader provide a set of circumstances, that is, his leadership role in a military context and his disillusionment with the purpose and objectives of the war he was involved in. This highlights a process in which Weick et al., 2005, suggested that sense-making starts with noticing and bracketing, that is, inventing new meaning as well as labeling. Everything that I'd been fighting for was flawed. Making sense of the past also has an action component. What do I do next? That is, choosing and commitment to act, developing the commitment to act. Sense-making therefore involves placing the life experience into a framework, deriving new self-relevant information from social experiences and imposing meaning on the information to inform one's understanding. Roberts, et al., 2005, p. It is through life stories or self-narratives that the leader achieves self-concept clarity. It provides him or her with a meaning system from which to feel, think and act. Shamir and Ilam, 2005, p. And provide answers to questions such as, how and why have I become a leader? Making sense of the past and present. Two other processes can be used in the sense-making process: reflection and feedback. Reflection can be regarded as the process of analyzing, reconsider and questioning experiences within a broad context of issues. Murray and Kujundzik, 2005. This means we ask ourselves questions around strategic direction and relationships. For example, 1. Are we pursuing the right strategy before we implement it? 2. Do we relate well enough to each other to effectively coordinate our actions for goal achievement? An example of reflection is as follows. So I've spent a lot of time understanding what's happened in my career that shaped the person that I am and why I do things the way that I do. Reflection constantly saying, hang on, are we going in the right direction? Let's just reassess, let's revalidate, let's reflect, let's bear in mind what's going on outside ourselves, and let's bring that knowledge back in and inform our behavior as leaders. Reflexive assessment. It involves challenging our own assumptions, thinking in such a manner that it challenges our beliefs, values and our way of seeing reality in order to assess their impact on our lives. A further process used in synthesis and making sense of history and trigger events is the use of feedback. Such feedback often has to be elicited to create self-awareness. The following narrative explains how feedback can be used as a sense-making tool. We are rigorous with 360s and one-to-ones and feedback sessions, and we use those as tools to ensure that we have the right dialogue. So I will always have brutal open dialogue with my people about my leadership style, their leadership style, how we're working together, areas where I can improve. And, everyone is flawed. We're all making mistakes all the time, and so a massive part of the job of being a leader is to be self-aware enough to know when something's not quite right and then to seek guidance and counsel as to what it is that may be wrong behaviorally and then to act on it. But you can't do it without dialogue. You've got to have the tough conversations, the open, honest, mutually respectful conversations with your people, because if they're frightened of you or if they think you're an idiot, you're not going to get those conversations. But if you've got the balance right, if they do get inspired by you, in fact, if they get inspired by you, and then that very same person is asking them for advice, that's doubly inspirational because you think, wow, somebody who I'm inspired by is actually asking me for help and advice. So it actually works. It's a double whammy if you like. So I identify my development needs through a mix of using tools like the 360, but overwhelmingly more importantly, through dialogue, through deep-rooted, open, honest, transparent dialogue. That's how you find out how you're doing. Use measuring instruments to obtain feedback. Engage in dialogue about your strengths and weaknesses. Be open and honest in receiving feedback. Do not be defensive. Getting feedback, as many of the CEOs interviewed have done, is an important mechanism that can be used in the sense-making process, as it assists in understanding your own strengths and possible areas for improvement, as well as identifying actions. The story about 360 also emphasizes the use of helping relationships, that is, being open and trusting about problems, and sharing them with subordinates. This also highlights the fact that sense-making does not take place in isolation, but various social factors, for example dialogue and communication, assist in the sense-making process. What is important is that the leader must not deny or distort or ignore feedback but uses the feedback to understand the relevance and importance of events. Leaders who do not encourage and support feedback during the change process weaken their positions considerably. Mechanisms to elicit feedback include asking employees how the change is going using barometer surveys to gauge reactions, observation, and establish Ginger groups. A Ginger group is a representative cross-sectional group of employees who provide feedback on the plan itself, its communication and its implementation. This may allow groups who are not part of the executive team to input in important ways, and it is a way to respect the minority voice in the organization. The quotations that follow highlight specific trigger events and express the storyteller's identities, which are products of the relationship between life stories and the organized stories of these experiences. Shamir and Ilam, 2005, p. Gardner et al., 2005a, suggest that trigger events serve as positive forces in developing leader self-awareness. It seems that it is predominantly significant life events, in contrast with routine life experiences, that trigger changes in the self-knowledge structures of leaders. Roberts, et al., 2005, suggest in this regard that revisions in self-knowledge structures occur when individuals undergo an aha experience or jolt, a discrepant or surprising event that causes people to pause and reflect on their experience. P. It is not only the positive experiences that we can learn from but also from our negative life experiences or life events. These crucibles of leadership, a transformative experience which forces you to examine your values, question assumptions, and your purpose, Bennis and Thomas, 2002, and your ability to overcome adversity, distinguishes good from extraordinary leaders. A crucible refers to the vessel in which alchemists, during medieval times, attempted to turn base metals into gold. In other words, a crucible is a transformational experience which toughens and changes people and gives them a new sense of identity, motivation, and purpose. A crucible is not the same as a life stage or transition, like moving from adolescence to adulthood, but is more like a test that corners individuals and forces them to answer questions about who they are and what is really important to them. It can be explained as follows. I'm one of 7 children and my parents were divorced when I was 11. Both of my parents were alcoholics. My mother from the age of 7 was prescription drug dependent and she was drug dependent until she died. She had 2 nervous breakdowns after my father left and she was in and out of mental hospitals. I'm the third in the 7. My 2 elder sisters left home as soon as they possibly could. They both left at the age of 16. At the age of 14, I was the mother to my 4 younger sisters and brothers because my mother just wasn't capable of looking after us. We lived on benefits and I cannot remember my teenage years being anything other than daily struggle. That's not an exaggeration. Some days you got home from school and there was nothing to eat and you had to try and pacify 4 younger children who weren't going to get any tea before they went to bed. So that's what it was like and what that did. Well, there was a number of things that did for me. I am hugely independent and one of the things that I've had to deal with whilst being in this role is making sure I have a coach and a mentor myself. I needed a support structure because I couldn't do what I needed to do without it, but I very, very rarely asked for help. In fact, I never asked for help before I came into this job because I'm hugely independent because I had to make sure that my brothers and sisters were okay. They were all looking to me to make sure they were okay. So I couldn't fall apart because I had a mother that was falling apart and I had a father that wasn't there, so I was it. So that sort of shaped definitely shaped my approach to life and change. The other thing it did was drive me to ensure that I was never ever in that situation again. Example of a crucible sense-making of the situation, assuming responsibility in the family, learning to make decisions without support structures, resolving never to be in such a situation again ever, understanding or making sense of your history and meaningful moments of your life is a key building block on the journey of becoming an authentic leader. The following exercise will assist you in this regard. The first step in becoming authentic is by constructing and understanding your life story. Life stories provide you with a meaning system from which you can act authentically. Interpret reality and act in a way that gives your interpretations and actions personal meaning. Keegan, 1983, p. Constructing your life story. Think of your life as it were a novel. Divide your life novel into the following chapters. Chapter 8, Late Adulthood, 56 plus. For each chapter, identify and describe critical events in your life, incidences/challenges/key turning points in your life, disappointments, crucibles. Also describe the feelings you experienced, the people involved or who impacted on your life. The analysis of your life story will take place in a later exercise. Being self-aware. Self-awareness refers to the extent the leader understands his/her own strengths, weaknesses, motives, how they are perceived by their followers, and know what is important to them. Self-awareness refers to the extent to which the leader is aware of various aspects of the self and to which their self-perceptions are internally integrated and congruent with the ways others perceive them. Klenka, 2007, p. Sense-making can be regarded as the precursor to achieve self-awareness, and it is through the use of different sense-making processes that the leader gains insight and understanding of his/her values, identity, and emotions. Kernis, 2003. Avolio and Gardner, 2005, as well as Wallumbwa et al., 2008, argue in this regard that the starting point of authentic leadership is self-awareness, which implies that a leader knows what he or she regards as important. May et al. Learning from the past can be explained as follows, and I think it taught me resilience. So frankly, after the horror of the war that I fought in, like any war, business issues are a walk in the park. I mean, stuff that goes wrong is just easy in comparison, it's not life and death, and people take themselves far too seriously in business, I always find. And I think that's been a rock for me to depend on, that history. Self-awareness moved beyond surface-level thinking. I learned that I shouldn't be ashamed or embarrassed about the things that I'm good at, and I also shouldn't stress too much over the things that I'm not very good at. Perfection is one of my weaknesses, and I continually strive for the perfect solution to everything, and actually, if it's 80% good enough, it's good enough, but I beat myself up. I go home and I say this to my team now. I go home some days and I stand in front of the bathroom mirror and I say, that was crap, you did a crap job today, you did this and you said this, and that was completely and utterly the wrong thing to do, you stupid woman. And I do that. I am my biggest critic of myself, and what that tends to do is, it overshadows the things that I'm damn good at and what I think I've learned in previous roles. Self-awareness is making sense of events and interpreting your circumstances. You've got to have that belief in yourself. I mean, I'm right, but at my age, I don't have to worry whether I'm right or whether I'm wrong because I'm quite contented with my life. I've been through all the problems. I've been through more nonsense than % of people that would have survived, built an empire, nearly lost it, lost a fortune, hanging over the side of the cliff with my fingernails and fighting back, and building another empire. Self-awareness is obtained through self-observation and reflection. Self-awareness can be regarded not as an end in itself but a continuous process where the leader develops self-knowledge through understanding the meaning of their life stories. Shamir and Ilam, 2005, p. State in this regard, this creates self-concept clarity because it organizes life events into gestalt structures that establishes connections between those events so that the person's life is experienced as a coherent unfolding process. Self-awareness helps a leader to understand his/her unique capabilities, knowledge, and experiences, and is achieved through self-reflection and feedback. It is through self-awareness that a leader understands their own biases, mental models, and the impact these may have on their ability to lead change effectively. Understanding your values are learned through socialization processes, are formed by life experiences, are internalized, and then become key components of the self. Gardner et al., 2005a. The importance of values is highlighted by authors such as Allport, 1955, and Swartz, 1994, and it is argued that values direct behavior, serve as standards, and once internalized, become an integral part of the self. Gardner et al., 2005, p. 350b. A key dimension of authentic leadership is a clear understanding of one's values, and is regarded as a prerequisite for authenticity and authentic leadership. George, 2003. This can be explained as follows. Well, we have our values at Organization X, and of course when I was being selected to come as a chief executive of Organization X from outside the business, one of the most important things was to ensure that my own values were very aligned to Organization X values, because if there was a misalignment there, I think it would cause real problems. To have a chief exec whose values were different from the values of the company. If you go through the Organization X values, it's about being enthusiastic and supportive in everything that we do. Well, that's very much how I think I am as an individual. It is very much about treating everyone with consideration and respect, which are very much the values I was taught probably as a child by my parents. That what was expected of me as an individual and of everyone in society, that you should treat people with consideration and respect no matter who they were. And then the last one, I suppose, is about being open and honest, and that is very much me. Sometimes I would say possibly to a fault. I'll always be open and honest and accept that sometimes it doesn't make it an easy path for you to follow if you're being open and honest when you're being asked your views about things or when you need to give your view about things. So those values that I've just described are what would be written down, that you would see written down for Organization X, and I think they're very much the values that I would have. I suppose I'm very much someone who the values that I was taught to stick up for the underdog, to stick up for those who can't really fend for themselves. I come very much from a working class background where, times were tough when I was growing up. There wasn't a lot of money around, and therefore I think you were taught the value of anything from clothing to treats to food on the table, that, you mustn't really take too much for granted in life because you never know when you're personally not going to have much. So I think they're quite deep-rooted ingrained values around respecting others, appreciating what you have, and trying to do as much as you can to help those who are in a less fortunate position than you. There needs to be congruence between organizational and individual level values. Demonstrate your values through behaviors. Early life experiences, parents, role models play an important role in value formation. Values develop through social interactions with role models, for example parents, are learned and may result from personal introspection and reflection. The core characteristic of authenticity can be regarded as to know, accept, and remain true to oneself. Avolio et al., 2004, p. Or as Shakespeare puts it, this above all, to thine own self be true, and it must follow, as the night the day, thou canst not then be false to any man. Authentic leaders are not only aware of their personal values, Avolio et al., 2004, but act accordingly, Elise, et al. Values guide behavior, and the following serve as examples in this regard. So I understand now what my values are and why they are that, why they are as strong as they are, Because I've gone through this period of understanding of why I do things and why I think in certain ways and why I believe in certain things and not others. I wouldn't have had that understanding if I hadn't invested the time in understanding myself. Understanding your own values takes a conscious effort on your part. I'm a very straightforward, honest person. What you see is that you get. That appeals to some people. It's not quite the English psyche because English people are very good sometimes at putting a smile on their face and not telling you what they really think. I tell you exactly what I think. If I don't like it, I'll tell you. I believe in what I believe in. I don't affiliate myself politically with different parties. I'm happy to work with all good politicians, whether they're left, right or center, providing they're good people and sincere and what I think they're doing is good for the country, and that's where I sit. So different leaders of different political parties ask my opinion on things from time. Am I flattered about it? I'm one of the few people who'll give them a straight answer, and if they don't want my opinion, don't ask me. It's quite simple, but I'm not here to be a sycophant. I'm not looking, either, to make too many new friends in my life. Act according to your own value system irrespective of the circumstances. Authentic leaders are specific and clear about their personal values, understand how their values influence their behavior and live their life according to these understood values. Elise, et al. Not only is it important for the leader to act according to his/her own values and be authentic in their interaction with others, but the leader should also be resistant to social or situational pressures and not compromise those values. The following exercise will help you to identify and articulate your values. My core values: what in life is most important to me? From the things you liked, can you identify any core principles or values? What are your top 5 values and when did they become important to you? How do your values influence your behavior? What are your values? Examples of values: dependable, reliable, loyal, committed, open-minded, consistent, honest, efficient, innovative, creative, humorous, motivated, positive, optimistic, inspiring, passionate, respectful. It is relatively easy to live according to your values when things are going well. The test, however, is the ability to act according to your values when you are under pressure. Martin Luther King summarized this succinctly by stating, "The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy." A core set of values enable you to develop leadership principles, that is, values translated into action. Principles are guidelines and act as a compass to help us determine how to act in certain circumstances. Authentic leadership theory proposes that the authentic leader's values guide his/her behavior, possesses self-knowledge which reflects clarity about their personal values and convictions, and are able to resist social pressure. Shamir and Ilam, 2005. Look at the following example. I think the first thing is to be aware when a decision is actually really starting to test your values. It's when I think there's almost a gut instinct that maybe something you are being tempted to make a decision on is not really in keeping with what you've previously said about your values and what you stand for and what the company stands for. So it's almost I don't know. I think again, if you can listen to the signals that you tend to produce as a human being, that this doesn't quite feel right, probably that's when you're starting to get into uncomfortable territory. I find that it's helpful to almost voice that and let people know that's the dilemma that you're facing, to openly say this is a difficult decision because it's really challenging my values, the values of the business, and I want to remain true to the values, but I'm finding the decision quite difficult for these reasons. And I think almost by airing it, you can start to get other people to engage in the same dilemma and debate and almost become more supportive, to help find a solution that still allows you to make the decision that needs to be made but not lose your values. And I think sometimes it's about courage, To say that you're being true to your values, and if those values are going to mean anything, if they're really going to be worth anything, then you will be judged on that, not by what you say but by what you do, and to remind yourself that's how people will judge you as a leader. Everyone can say fine words about their values, but people judge whether you're true to those values or not by what you're then seen to do. So I think there's a need for consideration, thought, engagement of other people into the debate, potentially that dilemma that you're facing, and then lots of communication afterwards to explain to people that this was the decision-making process that you went through, but to remain true to your values. This is the decision that you've taken, and to say to people in line with my values, this is the decision that I've taken. Have a clear understanding of what your values are. Do not be afraid to articulate your values. Use dialogue to gain situational clarity. Walk the talk. Having a clear understanding of what your values are, knowing how your values influence your behavior, and a willingness to stick to your values are key components of becoming authentic. This also implies a willingness to take personal risks, articulating your values in hostile situations and environments. Understanding and accepting who you are. Leader identity can be viewed as the knowledge a person has about him or herself and assists in organizing and give meaning to behavior. Day and Sin, 2011, argue that identity integrates various elements of the self-concept, and it helps to ground individuals in terms of who they are, what their major goals and aspirations are, and what their personal strengths and challenges are. A clear understanding of who am I, that is, having self-concept clarity, may also lead to the experience of feelings of self-liking and self-acceptance, Kernis, 2003, as well as a positive perception of their ability to perform across a range of situations, Judge et al. Authentic leaders are not only clear on who they are but accept themselves with their strengths and weaknesses. Kernis, 2003, p. argues in this regard that these individuals are people who like, value, and accept themselves, imperfections and all. Look at the following examples. There are things that I used to do that I have stopped doing. I used to apologize a lot for being regularly 2 or 3 minutes late, which I wish I didn't do, but I used to devote hours apologizing about it, and I used to devote similar numbers of hours apologizing for being quite a chaotic person in relation to paper. Hopeless with paper. My desk is covered in bits of paper and I've never been very good at filing things because I think they all have a completely separate identity. I don't want to put them together because they don't really quite belong together. And I used to waste a lot of time feeling I was failing by not having a tidy desk and therefore demonstrating a tidy mind or whatever I thought I was doing, and I would apologize for that, and I've stopped it. And I stopped after the leadership program. I think which was yes, one thing that really dropped in for me, which was yes, I can try harder to be a better completer/finisher, a better filing clerk, be on time, and I do, and I will continue to, and it works sometimes, but it's important that I'm me, and I am better at starting things, and I am being creative when I'm juggling 18 different bits of paper, and I need to put structures in place that support that. Understand what is important to you. Do not always need to live up to expectations of others. Accept yourself with your strengths and weaknesses. So I've stopped worrying about that. I've got more confidence in myself that I know enough about what to do and how to get the best out of people and how to motivate people to think that I can make a reasonable fist at most things. But it's only when you're really your own man can you really be yourself, because the moment you're having to please other people and think, am I going to get the promotion? Am I now going to be able to move from this company to that company, so I'm not going to piss anybody off along the way because I want them to recommend me? Think I'm a nice person, no different than in your activity in a university. You don't want to go around being right but being confrontational by saying, well, that's not right, and this, and that. They'll say, well, he's a difficult bloke. We don't want to. People used to think I was difficult, not difficult. People used to think I was very aggressive when I was younger. I was, so what? But you know, you are what you are. And I am what I am. Believe in yourself and your own abilities. Make peace with your inner self. Leaders who are able to make sense of their history and trigger events are also able to achieve high levels of self-awareness, understanding their values and motives, and these formed key building blocks in the formation of the leader identity. It is therefore the ability to learn and find meaning, not only from positive events but also from negative life events that shape us, inspire us, and teach us to lead. Bennis and Thomas, 2002. Leaders who have a clear sense of their self may strive for open and truthful relationships with others. Spitzmuller and Elise, 2010, and are willing to reveal personal information about themselves. Avolio and Gardner, 2005. This also means the leader accepts his/her strengths and weaknesses and is open and willing to share information. Regarding openness in interpersonal relationships, some leaders emphasize the following: be prepared to self-disclose, be prepared to talk to people about your strengths, but absolutely in equal measure be very prepared to talk to people about your limitations and where you need their help, because the more that you do that, as a leader, the more they will identify with you as a human being and the more they'll be likely to help you when they realize you're in trouble because you're in an area you know nothing about or that you're weak at. Be human. Humans are allowed to make mistakes. Feeling uncertain and inadequate. You do not need to have answers to all problems, I said, because I have to ensure that I'm not frightened to ask for help and I'm not fearful of saying actually I don't know, or could you support me in this? Do not be afraid to ask for help. The willingness of leaders to communicate personal learning and insights about themselves are very important, as these make followers aware of the leader's core values and beliefs. Many managers feel uncomfortable sharing personal emotions with others in the workplace. Traditionally, it was frowned upon to express and demonstrate emotions in the workplace. An important component of organizational change is how employees experience change. That is, it is about feelings and emotions. The starting point in helping employees dealing with their emotions and feelings is the ability to understand and manage our own emotions. Making sense of your life story will help you to understand how your life events have shaped you as a leader and provide a better understanding of your behavior in your interaction with others. Reflecting on the chapters of your life novel, answer the following questions. What life themes/messages can you extract from the different chapters? What are the 5 most important things you have learned about your life? How did you overcome the crucibles or transformative experiences in your life? How did it shape you as the person who you are? What are your values and how did your life experience help you to develop these values? How did your life experiences shape you as a leader, or putting it differently, how have your experiences inspired you, shaped you, and taught you to lead? What drives you? To what extent was it possible for you to act according to your own values and be authentic in your interaction with others? Do you need to do certain things differently? If so, what are they and how are you going to do it? Making sense of your life story. Strategies for becoming more authentic despite all the information available to improve leadership, for example self-help guides, books on self-improvement and so on. No quick fixes or recipes exist. Becoming more authentic is about a choice that you make. You need to choose to be you. The following narrative explains this personal choice in more detail. You have to make a positive choice. No one else can do it except them. In other words, there's no rule book to follow, because everyone, by definition, is different. They are who they are. So it's about choice. You have to choose. I choose to be me and I'm fine with it. It's a bit like saying I'm an alcoholic and coming out with it at an AA meeting. You have to choose to be you. I'm okay with being me. Me is fine, me is great, me is also not great in certain areas, but I'm happy to talk about it. But it's a positive choice and I can encourage people to do that, but ultimately it is their choice, and if they choose not to, then, that's their choice, fine. But every single one of us has that choice, and we have the power to choose to be ourselves. The great thing about being yourself, of course, is that you can't actually be dishonest then. It's marvelously secure. It's a bit like always telling the truth. It's a great place to be because you can never make a mistake. Whereas if your leadership style is full of falsehoods and manipulations and misrepresentations, then I mean you're dead, because you just can't possibly remember by the time you get to my age what you said when to whom. I mean, it's just hopeless. So it's just easier. Just tell the truth, just be who you are. It's the easiest thing in the world then. You can't go wrong, and people recognize that, and people follow you more. People will be more loyal, and they'll help you when you're down, and they'll applaud you when you're up. So I think any CEO who's wondering how to be more authentic has got a real problem, and whether they are a CEO or not, it should be the question, because you just can't be a leader today without being authentic, I don't think. It's a disaster. Certainly in our world we see plenty of inauthentic leaders in other companies, and that makes us pleased to be where we are, because I mean, I couldn't bear to work for an inauthentic leader. It just wouldn't work for me at all, and it's vital. Making a choice to become authentic is the first step on the authentic journey. You have the power to make the choice. Are you willing to take personal risk? How will you know if you act in an authentic manner? Becoming authentic is a journey you embark on, and although there are no recipes, we can learn from authentic leaders in practice. It seems that not only do you have to make choices, that is, becoming more authentic, but you also need to understand and make sense of your life story. It also involves a willingness to take personal risks and experimenting with behavior in different contexts. The involvement of significant others, the creation of support structures, and a willingness to invest resources in your own development are highlighted as helpful mechanisms in becoming more authentic. It also seems that, 1. Core values act as a compass that provides guidance in the development process, and 2. You need to have confidence and a belief in yourself that you are able to change. Lastly, the importance of creating a work-life balance is emphasized, and time for personal reflection is created. The following discussion explains these strategies in more detail. Know themselves, look at, not examine your history and what makes you the person that you are. And I'd never done the life chart before, and when I drew it, it was like, oh my God, it wasn't this sort of soft undulating little curve, it was this huge peaks and troughs, huge, like icicles. It was weird. And that was a revelation for me. It really was a revelation for me, but try not to overanalyze it, because I think if you do, you can become very introverted and also very risk-averse. You don't want to get to a point where you're questioning all your decisions and all your actions and thinking, oh my God, does that look authentic or doesn't it? Does it look like a transactional leader or a transformational leader? If you get to that point, and believe me, I know some people like that, you've lost the plot if you get to that point. So I would just say, know yourself and don't be too hard on yourself, because you will make mistakes, you will. And I've made loads of them, fortunately not many that have been catastrophic. I think if I had to play this over again, if I had to play this out again, I'd be much easier on myself. I wouldn't continually strive for the perfection, because the 10% gain that you get with a 90% time investment just isn't worth it. Draw your lifeline and make sense of your life story. Becoming authentic is a journey. Be willing to experiment with behaviors. Have confidence in your ability. Celebrate your successes. Don't be too hard on yourself. Don't drive for perfection. Get support. Put at least a coaching provision in place for yourself, especially when you're first new in a chief exec job. Always have an eye to the future and the long term. Put yourself at the bottom of the inverted triangle. You're there to support the rest of the organization, and the rest of the organization isn't there to support you. Be humble, be guided by your values, because usually they're right. Usually people don't make it to a chief exec position unless they've got strong values and determination. Invest in your leadership skill and hone it as much as you possibly can. Try to get some work-life balance, says she who doesn't have any work-life balance at all. And create space to think, because your day can just get crowded out with stuff and you need space to think, because if you're not thinking, you can be damn sure the rest of the organization isn't either. And they need you to think. If you're the chief exec, they need you to be thinking things through. Have confidence in your own ability. Create and make use of support structures. Use your values as a guiding compass. Invest in your own development. Create work-life balance. Create space for reflection. Leading change authentically. From the previous discussion, it should be clear that successful leadership is not about emulating somebody else but leading in a way that is aligned with you as a person. This means your leadership style needs to be consistent with your values and your personality, and this should be evident in your behaviors. Making sense of who you are also implies that you need to have a clear sense of purpose, and in this regard George, 2003, p. highlights the following. It is essential that you first answer the question, leadership for what purpose? If you lack purpose and direction in leading, why should anyone follow you? Complete the following exercise. What 3 or 4 words would describe you as a leader? What is your leadership purpose? What motivates you to lead? What are you passionate about? Leadership for what purpose? Authentic leaders have a clear understanding of who they are, what their motivations and passions are, lead with purpose and demonstrate behaviors that are aligned with their values. They understand their strengths and weaknesses, are consistent in their interaction with others, and lead with their heads as well as their hearts. George et al., 2007, p. Integrating the different authentic leadership perspectives from authors such as Elise et al., 2005, Avolio and Gardner, 2005, Gardner et al., 2005, and George et al., 2007, we can make the following linkages between authentic leadership and leading organizational change. Linkages between authentic leadership and change. Authentic leadership characteristics. Influence on the change process or change recipients. A high level of self-awareness may lead to an understanding of personal biases and a good understanding of they are perceived by others. The way we implement and lead change is influenced by our own mental models. If we understand how our mental models influence our thoughts and behaviors, we can be aware of how our mental models impact on the change process. This is also true for the way we interact with others. Understanding the impact we have on others will enable us to be sensitive to how people act and react in the change process. Authentic leaders do not distort, exaggerate, or ignore information and pay equal attention to positive and negative information. The leader is open to feedback and allows for openness and honesty in conversations. Being open to feedback and information sends a signal to change recipients that they can be open and honest in sharing their change experiences. It is allowed to take risks and experiment with new behaviors. It is especially important not to distort information about the change process. Be open and willing to share relevant information with change recipients. This does not only relate to the change process but also to feedback the leader may receive about his or her style of leadership. Authentic leaders use personal feedback as a mechanism to improve and develop themselves to become even better leaders. The leader's motives, goals, and values are transparent and evident to followers and is willing to disclose the true self to followers. Consistency exists between values and behaviors. For example, authentic leaders will say what they mean what they say. Organizational change leads to uncertainty and followers need leaders who are consistent, trustworthy, and leading by example. Being transparent creates trust between the leader and follower, fostering teamwork and cooperation. A key component of any change process is the creation of high levels of trust between change agents and change recipients. Articulating your values, goals, and motives provides certainty, a much-needed quality in any change process. Authentic leaders are willing to share emotions and understand the role of emotions in other people. Change recipients experience different types of emotions during the change process. Before you are able to address their emotions, you need to understand and make sense of your own emotions. You need to reflect on questions such as, why am I feeling this way? What influenced my emotions? How am I going to deal with it? Putting it differently, you need to be able to recognize and understand your own emotions and their impact on others. It also means you need to be perceptive of the emotions of the change recipients. If you really understand how they feel, you will be able to assist them in managing their own emotions more effectively. Authentic leaders have confidence, hope, self-efficacy, and resilience, and have an optimistic view of the future in any change process. Change recipients do not only need leaders they can trust, but also leaders who are able to show them the way forward. Being optimistic and hopeful about the change process creates energy and impetus for the change. Change is tough, and if you are the change agent, you need to instill confidence in your followers that you are competent and the right person to lead the change. You also need to demonstrate resilience. Remember the proverb, when the going gets tough, the tough get going, or putting it differently, when a situation becomes difficult, the strong will work harder to meet this challenge. They are able to build long-term relationships with followers. Having personal integrity will enable you to build lasting relationships with your followers. Encouraging communication and dialogue, leading with purpose will enable you to forge relationships built on mutual understanding and values. They build strong relationships between individuals and teams, and this leads to positive social exchanges. A high emphasis is placed on the development of employees. Not only act the authentic leader as a role model for change recipients, but also places a high emphasis on developing authentic characteristics in followers. Furthermore, creating development opportunities for change recipients will support capacity and skills building that may be needed in the change process. From it should be clear that being authentic in leading change is beneficial as it influences followers in a positive way. Shamir and Ilam, 2005, state in this regard that if a leader's behavior is consistent and aligned with his/her values and beliefs, followers develop trust in the leader. This is possible because the leader provides behavioral cues that followers use to construct and interpret events, and this guides their behavior. Putting it differently, if the change leader establishes alignment between values and actions, he/she will say what they mean what they say. Trustworthiness is therefore inferred by displaying characteristics such as fairness, dependability, integrity, and honesty, and this can affect work attitudes and behaviors. Authentic change leaders also exhibit patterns of openness and clarity in their behavior toward others by 1. Sharing information needed to make decisions. 2. Accept others' input and provide constructive feedback to their followers. As a result, followers develop higher levels of psychological capital. This means followers, 1. Have more confidence in their own abilities, self-efficacy, and invest effort to be successful to succeed in demanding tasks. 2. Have positive expectations, optimism, about succeeding now and in the future. 3. Persevere toward goal attainment and when needed, redirecting paths to goals in order to succeed, hope, and 4. When experiencing problems and setbacks, bounce back, resilience, to achieve success. Luthans, et al. 2007, p. The starting point to becoming better at leading change is to develop and express authenticity. This means that you need to constantly reflect, make sense of your experiences, and use your insights to increase your authenticity in leadership. Chapter summary. In this chapter we explored the processes used in authentic leadership development and emphasized the importance of being authentic in leading change. We highlight the importance of synthesis and sense-making, through the use of specific processes, as key mechanisms in understanding key life-changing events. This sense-making ability leads to a heightened sense of self-awareness and self-insight, and provides not only a platform for value creation and motive development, but also for a construction of the self, that is, the forming of a change leader identity. This provides a platform for change leaders to be more open in interpersonal relationships, to be authentic, show compassion, and demonstrate self-transcendent behaviors. These are key resources in leading and managing change. As indicated, individuals use different processes in making sense of history and trigger events. Self-awareness and self-concept clarity are functions of the ability of the leader to make sense of the past and present. Shamir and Ilam, 2005, argue that leaders' life stories should be regarded as repositories of meaning and should be analyzed from a variety of perspectives. They argue that life stories should also be compared to others, family members, followers, and ordinary people, to determine if leaders' life stories are selectively constructed by the leaders. This means that you should develop mechanisms that assist you in distinguishing between authentic and inauthentic life stories. The life story approach should focus on revisiting your life events and the development of self-knowledge and interpretation, that is, sense-making. Remember, becoming authentic is a highly individualized process, and you can seek help in making sense of the past. Talking to somebody that you trust, or making use of mentoring and coaching serve as examples in this regard. Chapter 9: Change and Different. Change readiness. Are you ready for leading change? Chapter at a glance. This chapter builds on Chapter 1, where it was indicated that leading change in an authentic manner creates higher levels of change acceptance, collaboration, and trust. It was highlighted that an understanding of what I am, who I am, and why I am is the pivot point on which your change leadership depends, and without it, your orientation to your true north is missing. George et al., 2008, p. This chapter further explores individual attributes, behaviors, and competencies that you, the change leader, need to be aware of when leading and implementing change. These insights are captured in the CEO interviews and their insights. The first step, before implementing and leading change, is being introspective, for example, asking questions about 1. Your own philosophy of change, 2. The attributes you have that may impact positively and negatively on your ability to lead change effectively, and 3. What can you do to become ready for change? Beginning cases, preparation. Our orientation towards change, how we view change, is formed through sense-making of our past experiences with change and the influence of significant others in our lives. These experiences shape our perspectives and influence how we implement and lead change. Therefore, change starts with the change agent and a willingness to reinvent him or herself every day. This reinvention of the self is a conscious process. Creating and experimenting with new learning experiences are key building blocks of any individual change process. This can be illustrated as follows. My philosophy of change is straightforward. It starts with a strong belief that change is positive because I was educated that way, and that developed my view on change. My parents brought me up with the idea that we are all human beings and must constantly reinvent ourselves. You need to reinvent yourself constantly just because the world changes whether you like it or not. That is a given. There are 3 ways to grasp this reality. You can accept it and get ahead of it, follow it by being just part of this flow, or actually resist the change, but then you lose a great opportunity. Let me give you an example of how I embraced the change. I went to business school in USA, and one of my very first business classes was on leadership and change. The first 5 minutes we had, the business professor told us to do an experiment. If you have to change 3 things about you in your life/daily habits/physical changes, what would you change? The assignment was start small with a focus on the short term and change things more profoundly medium to long term. What I did was to shave my head, put my watch on the right wrist and changed glasses for contacts. Reinvention is a conscious choice. Identify what you want to change and implement small and incremental changes. Be willing to take personal risks. These were the 3 immediate changes I did, and the learning was interesting because it was the first time I was bald and people were looking at me differently, and I actually started to meet different people because different types of characters came to me, and that gave me a different perspective on people. The lenses I used to play basketball with glasses, it was just a pain and it was frustrating. And now I have lenses and I was again able to play basketball. The watch was just a reminder of the different perspectives I was getting. So a couple of months later I continued with this philosophy of change and seeing how this impacts. I used to read every single morning the Wall Street Journal in the same Starbucks. I then decided to read a different newspaper. I read the Financial Times. Different newspapers have a different structure, different writers, and different perspectives. If you read both, you get new perspectives. I also decided to change places to drink coffee, and again I start meeting different people. I then decided to get eye surgery, and it opened a new world for me as well. I was now able to participate in water sports. This was a very practical way for me as a student to understand how change can impact your life, can impact people's life. It brings more openness and more in-depth understanding about things. So these are clear conclusions about change I learned. 1. You need to reinvent yourself every day, and 2. You need to rethink things and reflect. Reflect on the new experiences and identify key personal learning and insights. People do this in different ways. A lot of people, when they go to sleep, they think about 1 or 2 impactful findings of the day, about their learnings, how they impacted on people. Other people actually write every day in a diary 3 or 4 bullet points about things that impacted their way of doing things or perceiving things or some key learnings. Sometimes they read back even as far as 3 years ago and they remember. This helps change. For me, the key learning and insights are: 1. Reinvent yourself every day, otherwise you lose ground, and 2. By doing so you learn a lot more about yourself and get a much more in-depth understanding of what is possible. Now, why is all this important? I think nature is all about change and life is all about change. Life equals change and death equals you don't change anymore. Question is, do you want to be alive or dead? Have a strategy to record key learning and insights. Chapter Introduction. The concept of readiness for change has received substantial attention in the literature, Prochaska et al., 1992, and it is generally accepted that organizational change readiness is an important building block for effective organizational change. Pelletier, 2006, by et al. Readiness for change can be regarded as a comprehensive attitude, Holt, et al., 2007, and is influenced simultaneously by the content, what is being changed, the process, how the change is being implemented, the context, circumstances under which the change is occurring, and individual attributes, that is, the characteristics of those being asked to change. P. Readiness for change refers to the mindset of employees, Cunningham et al., 2002, and can either be defined as a psychological state, that is, attitudes, beliefs and intentions, or described in structural terms, organizational resources and capabilities. More specifically, Armenakis et al., 1993, p. Regard readiness as an organizational member's beliefs, attitudes, and intentions regarding the extent to which the changes were needed and the organization's capacity to make those changes. We know from research that variables such as self-efficacy, EB et al., 2000, Armenakis et al., 2007, tolerance for ambiguity, Walker, et al., 2007, locus of control, Holt et al. 2007, and Demographical Characteristics, Weber, 2001, Spritzer and Mishra, 2002, are individual differences that may impact on the willingness of recipients to support and implement organizational change. While the variables mentioned refer to things that may impact on the readiness levels of change recipients, they are also applicable to the change agent responsible for implementing the change. When being tasked as the person responsible for implementing the change agents often do not sufficiently reflect on 1. Their own beliefs, attitudes, and feelings about the proposed changes and 2. The skills needed to successfully implement and lead the change. For us, the starting point in leading change effectively is the level of individual change readiness of the change leader. Mental models. A mental model or schema is a cognitive structure that represents organized knowledge about a given concept or type of stimulus and contains both the attributes of the concept and the relationship among the attributes. Fisk and Taylor, 1984, p. Putting it differently, mental models help people to S. That is the heart of change lessons from the CEO. Real people, real change. If it helped, a quick subscribe keeps more summaries coming. So how do change and authentic connect? That is exactly where we started. Go back to the top and watch it click into place.